My name is Elijah, and I survived one of the deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history. But that wasn't the worst part. What I saw, what came with the water, that's something I will never forget. And it followed me long after the city was evacuated. It started on August 29, 2005. I was living in the lower 9th Ward of New Orleans. The storm had been building for days. The news called it a Category 5, the worst we'd seen in decades. Most people left the city. I didn't. I couldn't. My apartment was all I had, and I thought, like everyone else, that maybe I could weather it. The first night was chaos. Wind howled like a living thing, tearing trees apart and slamming them against buildings. Power went out around 3 a.m. The street outside my apartment became a river. Cars floated by like toys. And then I noticed the water wasn't alone. There was movement in the shadows of the street. Something kept pace with the floating debris. Just below the surface, ripples formed, circling as if something huge and alive was swimming underneath. I told myself it was imagination. But the sounds, they weren't human. A low gurgle, like someone drowning and laughing at the same time. By morning, the lower 9th was submerged. I tried to leave, but the streets were impassable. I could see neighbors trapped on rooftops, screaming for help. Helicopters flew overhead, but they couldn't get everyone. I could hear the people being pulled under in the distance. I could see it, the water twisting unnaturally, consuming everything in its path. I stayed inside my apartment until the water reached the 2nd floor. I salvaged what I could. Canned food, bottled water, and a radio. On the first night, I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. I started hearing things moving in the water outside my windows. Shapes, dark and undefined, sliding beneath the surface. When I looked closer, I swore they were watching me. I didn't sleep. The sound of the wind mixed with rippling water kept me alert. Then the power came back, briefly, around 2 a.m. The light revealed something horrifying. Dozens of bodies floating in the street, some bloated, some mutilated, and some smiling. It was unnatural, unreal. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. I could feel eyes on me from beneath the water. The shapes swam closer to my building that night, circling as if deciding something. The next day, the water had risen higher, and my apartment became a temporary raft. I could hear cries from rooftops. Some people tried to call for help, but the helicopters couldn't reach them. And then I saw my first visitor. A figure, tall and distorted, rose from the water. Its skin glistened wet, reflecting the dim sunlight through the clouds. Its head tilted unnaturally, and it had no mouth. Or maybe its mouth was somewhere else, twisted sideways. The thing didn't move like a human. It glided across the water almost like it was swimming on land. I froze. My instinct screamed at me to hide, but I was already too late. The figure stopped below my window, and I swear it looked at me, not with eyes but with intent. I couldn't move. My mind blanked. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it sank into the water, leaving only ripples. I spent the next hours listening. The storm had subsided somewhat, but the water remained. I could hear whispers. Faint at first, then louder, calling names, familiar voices, my mother, my friends. They were dead, or so I thought, but the water carried their voices, begging me to join them. By the 3rd day, the city was in ruins. Helicopters managed to rescue some people, but I remained trapped. That night, a group of survivors from my block made it to my building. They were soaked, exhausted, terrified. Some of them had seen the same figures in the water, and some had been touched. One elderly woman said something grabbed her ankle while she floated past the corner of Jackson Street. She pulled free, but her hair was wet and clumped with something sticky, something that looked like mud but smelled like decay. The survivors and I barricaded ourselves in the apartment. We had to ration food. Water from the tap was undrinkable. And then the whispers started again. louder, more insistent. They weren't outside anymore. They were inside the walls, inside the floor, inside the ceilings. At 2:13 a.m., the power flickered and died. I swear I could hear footsteps on the ceiling above. Slow. Heavy. And then the scratching started. It sounded like claws on metal. Our building wasn't steel, but the sound carried through every wall. One of the men, a young guy named Marcus, tried to look through the window. He screamed. Not a normal scream. A sharp, wet, breaking scream. He fell back, shaking, pale. His hands were bloody. He hadn't touched anything. But when he fell, there was a smear on the glass. Black water dripping down. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in a corner with my back to the wall, listening to the storm outside and the whispers inside. The shapes beneath the water were patient, waiting, calculating. By the fourth day, we were desperate. We knew the water was rising again. The city had no plan. Rescue had stalled. And the water, it had changed. It no longer moved like water. It moved like intent, like something alive, something intelligent, something hunting. When I finally saw it again, I will never forget. A massive figure, tall as a building's first floor, rose out of the water. Its body was grotesque, humanoid, but stretched in places that should not bend. Its eyes reflected everything around, like black mirrors. Its mouth opened in a jagged, impossible line, and it whispered my name. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But my feet were frozen, and then the others screamed. They were dragged under the water, one by one, without a struggle. No one survived. The water was no longer just water. It was something else entirely. By the fifth day, the city was unrecognizable. Streets that were once familiar were now rivers of debris. Cars, appliances, and even pieces of homes floated aimlessly. The air smelled like salt, rot, and something worse. Something alive. I decided I had to move. Staying in one apartment, waiting for water or that thing beneath it wasn't survival. It was suicide. I tried to wade through the waist-deep water toward the nearest shelter. Red Cross signs were barely visible above the flood. Every step I took, the water seemed to react. Ripples formed without wind. Shadows moved beneath me, sometimes brushing my legs, sometimes just gliding a foot behind. When I finally reached the shelter, it was chaos. Hundreds of survivors crammed into the gymnasium. Cots lined every wall. Children clung to parents. Some had been trapped for days, others for hours, but all shared one thing: fear that went beyond the storm. That night, I noticed movement. At first, I thought it was someone shifting on a cot. Then I realized the shadows were moving independently, over cots, across the floor. They didn't stumble. They glided, silent and deliberate. And the faces, they weren't human. Wide, twisted grins, eyes too large, reflecting the dim light. No one else noticed. I tried to warn someone, but every time I pointed, the shadow would vanish, and everyone would shake their heads. I sat alone in the corner, gripping a chair leg like a weapon, hoping it wouldn't notice me. Around 2 a.m., the water taps in the bathroom turned on by themselves. I froze. The dripping was rhythmic, deliberate, like it was whispering. And it was. Come down. Join us. Play with us. The sound echoed through the gym. People stirred in their sleep, some murmuring, some crying, but no one else heard the whispers. It was inside my head, inside my bones. I tried to leave the shelter, thinking maybe outside was safer. I shouldn't have. Outside, the floodwaters had a life of their own. Shapes moved beneath the surface. Bodies, or things that once were bodies, pushed against floating debris. One woman screamed as a hand shot out of the water, gripping her ankle. She tore free, but the hand left black, slick residue on her skin. Inside, the shadows grew bolder. They hovered over cots, peering at sleeping victims. When someone moved, it recoiled, like it was toying with us, letting us think we were safe. The whispers grew, repeating our names, every name, mine, Marcus, the old woman, every survivor, individually called. By dawn, 15 people had vanished. Just gone. No struggle, no evidence. The floor was wet, but no footprints led away. The shelter staff pretended nothing happened. I knew better. Whatever was in the water, whatever had survived Katrina, had followed us here. That evening, the generator flickered and died. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, I could hear splashes in the hallways, water moving in ways it shouldn't. Something was outside, waiting. Then I saw them, silhouettes moving above the cots. Tall, thin figures, gliding without touching the floor, heads cocked unnaturally, faces pale and stretched, eyes black, grinning mouths moving, whispering. They weren't walking, they were hovering. I tried to alert the others. I screamed. Nobody saw them. Nobody believed me. By midnight, the whispers became commands. Come, join us, be with the water. Panic spread as some tried to flee. Doors that should have opened, didn't. Windows that should have broken, resisted. The shelter was no longer a refuge. It was a trap. I grabbed a flashlight and ran to the main doors. As I approached, the water seeped inside the building, faster than it should, carrying floating debris and something else. A figure rose from the water, taller than a man, its skin dripping wet, face distorted, mouth opening impossibly wide. It stared directly at me, and I felt every drop of fear I had ever known. I ran. I ran down corridors filled with water, past cots, past terrified survivors. Every turn revealed the same horror. Shadows, bodies, whispers. The roof offered no escape. All around me, floodwaters stretched as far as the eye could see. Shapes floated just beneath the surface, grinning, watching, waiting. And then I saw it. The thing from the first night. Taller than a building, its eyes reflecting the cloudy sky, a jagged mouth whispering my name. I froze. It smiled. The only way to survive now was to leave the city entirely. The morning after the night in the shelter, the city was eerily quiet. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake. But the water still moved, slowly, deliberately, carrying with it shapes that were not human. I made my way across rooftops, using debris as bridges. Every step I took, I could feel eyes on me from the water below. The things followed. Sometimes a hand would reach up, sometimes a face would emerge, staring directly at me before slipping back beneath the surface. I reached a cluster of survivors on another rooftop. They were huddled together, shivering, soaked, traumatized. None of them spoke. The ones I had known in the shelter were gone, swallowed by the water or taken. Their absence was a constant, gnawing dread. We saw a convoy of rescue buses approaching. They were supposed to evacuate survivors to higher ground, but the water wasn't done. As the buses edged closer, shadows emerged, stretching from the floodwaters like black fingers. Shapes that once were human tried to climb aboard. Some succeeded, and their screams echoed as the drivers slammed the doors shut. I joined the line of survivors climbing onto the buses. Every movement of the water seemed intelligent, anticipating our path. The first bus driver yelled at us to hurry. As I stepped in, I caught a glimpse of something massive beneath the water, something taller than any building, its jagged, grinning mouth splitting the surface as if smiling just for me. We drove slowly, navigating through debris-strewn streets. The water swirled unnaturally around the buses. Occasionally, a body floated past, or something that looked human. Its eyes reflected a black void, and it stared directly at me. I could feel it reaching into my mind, whispering, "You belong. You belong to the water." We reached a partially dry area, but the water followed. It formed channels that seemed alive, twisting around the bus. Occasionally, a hand or face would emerge from the water, lingering, mocking. The driver swore he saw something riding the water beside us, like a shadow made real. As we moved toward the outskirts of the city, the survivors began to talk. Names of those missing, whispers of horror from the shelter, stories of things dragging them into the flood. Some claimed the water spoke, calling them by name. Others said the shapes moved against the current, swimming upstream with intent. Night fell again. We parked on higher ground, barely above the flood level. I stepped out, trembling, staring back at the city. The floodwater reflected the orange glow of fires still burning. Shadows moved inside the water, too fast, too deliberate. And then I saw it. My first visitor, the massive figure. It rose slowly from the water, tall, twisted, smiling. It tilted its head as if studying me. I froze. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. It whispered my name, louder this time, deep, wet, and gurgling. "Elijah, join us. You can never leave." I stumbled back into the bus, the survivors looking at me in fear. The driver tried to comfort everyone, but the truth was clear. We had escaped the flood physically, but the water followed, and whatever survived, Katrina was patient, waiting for the right moment. For weeks after the hurricane, I couldn't sleep. Every storm made me check the water around my house. Every puddle reflected shapes that weren't my own. Sometimes I would hear whispers through the pipes, calling my name. The things from the flood had survived somehow, and they were patient. I moved away from New Orleans eventually, but I never stopped looking over my shoulder. No matter where I go, I can feel it. The water's gaze, the whispering, the waiting. Katrina wasn't just a storm. It was a herald, and it brought something alive, something that thrives in darkness, waiting for the next unsuspecting city, the next unwary soul. Even now, I can't shake it. I can't forget the sound of the water moving. Not like water should, but like it knew. It's out there, watching, waiting, and I survived, but only barely.